Okay guys, today we're going to talk about finding the least common multiple of two numbers. Least common multiple means we are finding the smallest multiple that two numbers have in common that are the same. Remember that multiples are skip counting, so multiples of 2 would be 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and so on. Multiples of 3 would be 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, and so on. So again, multiples are skip counting, and we want to find a multiple, the smallest multiple that two numbers have in common. I'm going to give you some tips to help you find the least common multiple in the most efficient way. And those tips are going to be looking at numbers that are consecutive, when one number is a multiple of the other, and when neither tip 1 or tip 2 will work. Okay, so the first tip is if the two numbers that you're trying to find the least common multiple for are consecutive, then you multiply them to find the least common multiple. So the word consecutive means when two numbers are in order. So 5 and 6 are consecutive. 7 and 8 are consecutive. So if when counting we would say one number right after the other, they are considered consecutive numbers. So let's look at some consecutive numbers. So 5 and 6. If we wanted to find the least common multiple of 5 and 6, we could multiply them to get 30 as the least common multiple. So just to check that, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. And I could do the same thing with 6, 6, 12, 18, 24, 30. So 30 is the smallest number that appears in both lists. Therefore, 30 is the least common multiple. Again, because they're consecutive, they get multiplied together in order to find the least common multiple. So let's do 3 and 4. Again, I could list them out and do 4, 8, 12, and 3, 6, 9, 12. And again, 12 is the smallest number that appears in both lists. But I could have just multiplied them together in order to get the least common multiple of 12. So you try. What do you think the least common multiple of 7 and 8 would be? You got it. It's 56 because 7 times 8 is 56. Because they are consecutive, we can multiply them together. What about 8 and 9? What do you think the least common multiple of 8 and 9 would be? Again, you are correct. 8 times 9 is 72. So the least common multiple of 8 and 9 is 72. So tip number 1, pretty easy. If the numbers are consecutive, we can multiply them together to find the least common multiple. If they are not consecutive, the next thing we're going to check, and we're going to see if one number is a multiple of the other, then the larger number is the least common multiple. So let's look at some examples of this. So if I had 5 and 10. Ten is a multiple of 5, therefore it is the least common multiple. If I had 8 and 16, because 16 is a multiple of 8, then 16 is the least common multiple, because it would always be the first one that we list. So the LCM is 16. If we did 9 and 27, 27 is a multiple of 9, because 9, 18, 27, then 27 must be the least common multiple. So first we're going to go through and check if the numbers are consecutive. We can multiply them together to find the least common multiple. If they're not consecutive, move on to tip 2. If one is the multiple of the other, then the larger number is your least common multiple. But sometimes tip 1's not going to work. And then you move to tip 2, and that's not going to work either. So for tip 3, if neither tip 1 or tip 2 work, you have to list the multiples of the larger number first until you come to one that is a multiple of both. So for example, 6 and 15. if I wanted to find the least common multiple, again, I would check my tips. They're not consecutive. 15 is not a multiple of 6. I'm going to list the larger multiples first until I come to one that is also a multiple of 6. Well, 15 times 1 is 15. 15 times 2 is 30. And I know that 6 can go into 30. Therefore, 30 is the least common multiple of 6 and 15. Let's look at another example. Let's look at 8 and 12. Again, 8 and 12, the other rules won't work. They are not consecutive. 12 is not a multiple of 8. So I need to list the multiples of 12 first, the larger number. We're doing that because it's less work. So 12, 24. And I know that 8 can go into 24. So my least common multiple must be 24. All right, so let's do some practice together. Again, as we go through and practice, we're going to check our tips along the way. So the first one is 4 and 20. Are 4 and 20 consecutive numbers? They are not. So we're going to move on to tip 2. Is 20 a multiple of 4? It is, because 4 times 5 is 20. So I know that my least common multiple is 20, because 20 is a multiple of 4. And I didn't even have to do any work. So looking at 9 and 10, again, we're going to check tip 1. Are they consecutive? They are consecutive, so we know we need to multiply them together in order to get a least common multiple of 90. On to looking for a least common multiple of 6 and 9. 6 and 9 are not consecutive. 9 is not a multiple of 6. So I need to list my multiples of 9 in order to find the least common. So 9, 18, 27. And I know that 6 can go into 18, but I'm just going to, if I listed them both out, you would still see it's going to be 18. All right, let's look at 15 and 20. Are these consecutive numbers? Nope. So we need to move on to tip 2. Is 20 a multiple of 15? No, it is not. So we're going to move on to tip 3, and we're going to list the multiples of the larger number first until we find one that we know. Whoops, sorry, not 16, 60. 15 will go into. And 60 is the smallest multiple that would appear in both lists, so our least common multiple is 60. 8 and 48, again, we're going to look at our tips. They are not consecutive. 48 is a multiple of 8, because 8 times 6 is 48. Therefore, I know that my least common multiple has to be 48. And down here at 4 and 5, they are consecutive. So we know with consecutive numbers, we can multiply them together to get a least common multiple of 20. So now that you've seen my tips to help you through your assignment, you will have a page in front of you where you can fill in the tips if you want. I would, so that you can put it in the notes section of your binder, and then fill out the problems on the rest of the paper in order to practice.